It is your responsibility to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. And I think sometimes we're waiting for I'm just going to wait for them to offer to help, or I'm just going to wait, it's not going to happen. So you take care of you in the best ways you can. And one of the things I ask myself at the end of the day, I literally do this. I say, how did I best take care of myself today?
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's been through and still going through the trenches of motherhood myself, I get it. Life gets busy and sometimes your relationship takes a back seat. But guess what? You can feel like a couple while raising kids, and I'm here to help. Join me each week here as we dive into the messy but fulfilling world of marriage and motherhood. From navigating conflict to reigniting that spark, we're going to chat about it all. So, if you're juggling mom life with wife life, this podcast is for you. And hey, if you love what you hear, I'd be so grateful if you could rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Here's this week's episode. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. So as you know, self-care is something that I talk a lot about, and it really affects how we feel in our lives, how we show up in our relationships, whether it's with your husband, whether it's with your kids, your friends, your family, whoever, even at work. It plays a huge role in how happy you feel and what you're willing to go for in life. So I am really excited to have Dr. Emily Jacobs here today to talk about how to make self-care feel less like a chore, because I cannot tell you how many times I've heard from mamas just like you who are like, self-care would be nice, but I don't even know where I'd find the time of day to do that. I'm too tired. I'm too busy. I can't even take space to just poop on my own without anyone trying to get into the bathroom, right? And I understand. And so I'm really excited to dive into this with you because it doesn't have to be this crazy process for you to figure out. It's actually a lot easier than you think, and it could really help you get back control of your life instead of feeling like everybody else but you is dictating how you spend your time and how you live. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our lovely guest here, Emily Jacobs. She is a board-certified doctorate-prepared integrative nurse wellness coach. Woo, that's a long one. She's a thought leader who resides in Beverly Hills, Michigan, with her husband and two vibrant little daughters. Her coaching helps daughters who are worthy of more to overcome fear and guilt so that they can start living a life they love. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Michelle. What a beautiful segue into the introduction. First of all, what you just hit on kind of is going to summarize the whole podcast because it's just something that's so important these days, right? And I think as women and now mothers, first of all, the motherhood role is a very caregiving role. There's forms of sacrificing, of course, like we all know this. We all knew this before we had kids. But here's the thing is that it's important to kind of look back on what you were taught about self-care, right? So when I kind of work with people, I talk about what was it like in your house growing up? What did your parents think about it? What did they talk about it? And most of us generationally, our parents really didn't talk much about it. Just being honest with most of our parents, right? And not in a blame situation, but in a self-care, it seemed like to them was like the vacation or like the spa day or getting your nails done on your birthday. Like it's just something you do occasionally on a special, it's a treat, right? And I think I even knew as a young kid, which is so wild to me to think back on this. I'm like, I don't know if that's what it is, Mom. Like, I think it's like being happy. I think it's doing things that make you happy. I think it's the essential definition of taking care of yourself. So like eating healthy, exercising, spending time with friends, like all of those things. And I think my mom was literally confused when my preteen age self was like, Mom, are you happy? And I was confused as a child because I'm like, but you don't look happy, you don't act happy, but you say you're happy. Why don't you just do something nice for yourself? And she would just I don't really know what you're talking about.
totally. So before we dive into this very, very important topic, can you share a little bit about you with us? Like, can you tell us how old your kids are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I am a mom of two daughters. They are 5.5, which, as anyone knows, a half age is very crucial in this world. So five and
Yep.
a half and just turned 3. So they're real littles. And what do I do? Okay, so I spent 20 years as a nurse. So 20 years in healthcare. Got all the way up to like my doctorate degree, climbed the corporate ladder in nursing leadership, and learned a lot of the lessons that I learned from my relationship with my mom started coming out in other relationships. So very grateful for some of the challenges and heartache we went through because it taught me a lot of things that I actually needed to know later in life. But so, yeah, I mean, most of my career was in nursing. And then now in the last, gosh, maybe 18 months or so, I resigned from that kind of tier of my life, right? Open the new chapter, super scary, but started my own business in coaching. And since then, ironically, healthcare companies have called me to be like a coaching consultant for, they call it a peer coach. So it's like someone that's very relatable. In healthcare, it's more unlikely that people aren't going to ask for help, right? They're not going to ask for counseling or therapy. Not all of them. I'm just like generally speaking, because we are the caregivers. We're not necessarily the care receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So healthcare givers have a hard time receiving help, have a hard time with that word self-care, and like, no, my job is to take care of all the people. And they just don't even know, like what they're doing now is give all day long. And then especially if you're a parent, give all night long to your kids and family, and you have nothing left for yourself. And so we can dive into that later, like how I'm really trying to help them come to terms with that. And at the same time, I'm also developing a community of motherhood support, like a motherhood support system. But I really believe in in-person things. And I really want to bring just that connection back to motherhood, that like, we don't have to do this alone. We can help each other out. And yeah, that's essentially what I'm doing now.
I love it. I love it. And so, what has led you to become this type of coach who is out there trying to help other caregivers, other moms live their best life?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it was what happened to me and what I allowed myself over the years, which was burnout, which was perfectionism, which was people pleasing. And I mean, here's the thing, like all of that served me for a long time and it felt good. And then I had my own kids, right?
Mm.
And so here's the person that just said yes to everybody. And I truly am honest when I say that I loved it. I really did. Like, yeah, I was the yes girl. Like, I did everything for everybody, but I actually also did love it. And then when it was time to like take care of myself and, get married and have kids, those people didn't understand. And I was like, no, I don't have that bandwidth anymore. I'm sorry. Like almost like chapter closed. I am not the giver anymore. But then it also hurt me because that was my personality. So then I would then burn out because I would still keep trying to help other people or just be there for them. Like I'm just kind of the person that people always wanted to talk to, hence like why I maybe went into coaching, because it just kind of naturally happened for me. But I think that I struggled with boundaries and I struggled with burnout and I learned it. And I helped myself before motherhood. But I feel like once I entered motherhood, I had to learn it in a different way. And it was it felt more intense, but I got through it faster than I did before. So it's like, I've been here before, Emily, I've learned these lessons. So it just kind of moved a little faster, but yeah, I think that's kind of the shift and where I kind of moved into it.
Yeah. And I love how, people like us have gone through it, like really have gone through it, and are now using that struggle that we used to experience. And sometimes we still do, right? We're not like quote unquote there yet, but we're definitely well on our way. And go out there and help people. Right? Like it really is so fulfilling being able to be like, look, I've walked that and I'm here for you to help you get through it as quickly as possible because it really doesn't have to be as hard as we think it is,
Mhm.
but not knowing what to do next or what your options are could really be debilitating for some people. So,
I think what you say, like even just the fact that if you, is not when you start not feeling alone, you already
mhm,
start feeling better. But there was just things I think in our parents' culture, and again, this is just my assumption of kind of what I went through, is that they just didn't talk about that
nope.
because that was a weakness and vulnerability was a weakness. But again, like even me as a child, I'm like, that's how I communicated with my friends. Like I was a deep child. Like I was like, I want to ins and outs. Like I just was like a soulful and like deep child. So that was always hard for me when my mom just wasn't like that. And that was fine. Like everyone's good, everyone's fine about it. But she was like, oh, you don't share that with people. And I'm like, no, you do, mom. That's how like relationships happen. And again, right? It's not like a blame thing. She did what she could do as a mother with the tools she had and which what she thought was right.
Yep.
And I just kind of knew I'm like that might work for you, even though I was like, I don't think it's working for you, but you do you. I'm gonna
Yep.
do something a little different over here.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, let's talk more about the topic we're here to discuss, which is how to make self care feel less like a chore, right? So, like, let's kind of unpack this. Why do moms specifically, end up feeling like taking care of themselves, right? Checking in with themselves is such a chore. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. I think it's that scar tissue from how you're raised. I do think that's implanted. It's a societal kind of norm that like moms are the sacrificial people. Now, the thing is, too, I do feel that moms sometimes do it to themselves, though. So, right, we take on the role. We're like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run the house. I'm going to, also, I'm going to do those things because that's what a lot of them did in the past. However, what a lot of moms are doing now is working and
Yeah.
working full time. So imagine now you have your full time job, then you have your full-time job as a mom because you're always thinking about it. I mean, even when you're at work, it's if you get a text message that your kid's sick, who is picking them up? You or the partner, right? And I know some families that actually go through their week. My husband and I did this at some point. It's like on Sunday, let's go through the week. Like, what do you have going on at work? And what do I have going on? And then in who's kind of the on-call emergency person? And there's a few days where both of us are like, neither, right? Like and like push comes to shove, it's just like one of us has to draw the short end of the stick and just call it what it is, and then realize we are also a parent, right?
Yes.
So, but then also then there's the third full-time job of managing the house, right? So imagine if you're the mom and you do all three of those and you might not have a partner, one. And then two, if you have a partner that doesn't really contribute to any of the, those other things. So I think that comes with communication, with if you have a partner, like if you have that partner, what are their roles in the house to manage it, right? And in the family to be that partner. So I think that's one of the number one key things is the communication of if you're not okay with it now, let's say you've been running with this for a while and you're like, well, how do I change this tomorrow? It literally just starts with the communication of, hey, the way things are working now are not working for me anymore. And it's not a blame thing. And it's, you can take full accountability. I allowed this to happen. I allowed it to be this way, but however, it's not going to work going forward. And you see, like, I'm not blaming. I didn't say you did this to me. I'm not angry. I'm like opening my heart honest. I'm not okay. And if you,
Yep.
my person that loves me, I'm hoping you can hear me. Right. Um, so that's one thing. And I also researched a book called Fair Play, which wasn't
Hmm.
really talking about it being 50-50 in the household. It just needed to feel fair. Right.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like things I do in the house, right? That people would say, oh, just give it up to your husband or give it up to the partner. But actually, I kind of like it. What I had to learn to do though is to stop complaining about the things that I wouldn't give to the other person. Right. So if that, like, I can explain more if that doesn't make sense, but like essentially it's, I kind of love running the calendar, and I love like kids' birthday parties and all the things. And ironically, just last night, my husband, I don't know, he told my daughter something for like St. Patrick's Day or, like the next holiday or whatever that he was going to do. And I just texted him this morning. I'm like, did you do the thing that you said you were going to do for them? Because that's in my brain all the time. And he goes, oh,
Yep.
shoot, I didn't. And I'm like, yeah, I got your back. Right. Because that's not something you normally do. But I do think it starts with communication, and I'm being upfront about how okay or not okay you are currently.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just going to plug it because this how would I not? If you're struggling with communication, you need to check out my Marriage Communication Essentials course. Okay. Because what she's sharing here is a very, very simple framework that you can use to change how you communicate, how you get your needs met, how you share what's going on with you without getting defensiveness from your partner, because that's what she's saying. She's saying, I'm not blaming, and blaming and criticizing and complaining and nagging it are all ways that are going to shut your partner down from wanting to listen and engage with you. Okay. So communication, like if you're just listening to this and you're not watching the video part, like I am nodding my head furiously. I am in complete agreement with her, because you are worthy of self-care. And if you're running a household with your husband, your partner, you're going to need their support to do that, because you can't just be like, all right, kids, you're on your own. Like if they're older, fantastic. You go take your time. You go do that because you trust that they can take care of themselves. But if they're young, you can't just be like, bye guys, I'm going to go for a walk. Like that is neglect, and we're not for that, right? So communicate what you need and work together, because I bet that if your husband needed to take a break, he would just be like, I'm going to go golfing with my buddies on this day. Okay? And that's it. So women need to be a little bit more like men in that sense, because they're like, this is not a question. It's a matter of like, how can we make this happen together? Because this is for my own individual personal good. So if you could bring yourself up to that level and like, no, I have things I want to do too, instead of complaining about, oh, well, he always goes missing on Sundays at 1 p.m. Okay, you can go missing another time too, right? Just as long as it's not at the same time and you don't have any caretakers available to fill in for you two going missing. So absolutely. Now, what about the whole like time and energy? Like it does take some planning, right? And also just like, I feel like a big part of people thinking that self-care is a chore is their idea of what self-care is, right? So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, okay. So here, that's how I thought it was. Okay. So I already told you I grew up in the family that self-care was kind of like a treat, a luxury day, or kind of
Yeah.
like that was how I was brought up. So then what I, in my adult brain, then put it in as after motherhood. Because right pre-motherhood, I was like, man, I was just doing my own thing. Like that was like 100% self-care. I just felt like, now looking back, I'm like, to do whatever I want, whenever I wanted it, that's 100% self-care. But then after motherhood, it started becoming like the one more thing on my to-do list. How will I possibly, oh, sure. Let me just check that off. I guess I'll meditate for 30 seconds because meditation felt like a chore. Like I was learning how to meditate when after I had my daughter, because I was a mess. Like I was a mess. And I was like, oh, well, calm people would meditate. So I'll go do that. It literally felt like a chore. So, I mean, come on, you can see how messed up it is when you think meditation's a chore, because you do have a choice as to how long it is. And then also switch your mindset. So if the word self-care is just embedded in these like nasty like thoughts, right? These just like really bad thoughts, then scratch it out and just replace it with taking care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 points on that is, number one is it is your responsibility to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. And I think sometimes we're waiting for like, I'm just going to wait for them to offer to help, or I'm just going to wait for, they'll, it's just like it's not going to happen. So you take care of you in the best ways you can. And one of the things I ask myself at the end of the day, I literally do this. I am a spiritual person, so I have a little conversation. And then I say, how did I best take care of myself today? Now, sometimes it's just the healthy meal because that's all I basically got around to. But I'm like, I'm not mad at that. I did it. Or sometimes it's eating like the unhealthy piece because it was just really fun to splurge. Like you can reverse it in whatever way you want it to look like. And maybe it was 3 deep breaths before I yelled at my daughter for the 100th time for bothering me. Like these are ways that are helping me. And it's almost like that. It's like self-care is like whatever you think it is, because it's what you are interpreting it to do, to nourish you and take care of you and whatever, right? So some moms that I'm talking with, we go back to the basics. Have you showered, brushed your teeth? What do you
Yes.
eat and drink? Like these are like and I don't even say these are the first time moms or the newborn moms because definitely them, but some of us even forget that later in motherhood. It's like, did you even eat food today? Like, where are
Mm-hmm.
you? And why are you not placing yourself on a worthy scale that like you also deserve to eat breakfast? Even, you're shoving it out to your kids and family, like you also deserve that too. So I think there's a lot more mental work in that when people are like, well, I have to do this for other people and I have to do that. Again, there's nothing wrong with that unless it's really costing you your peace and joy, and then you're blaming and resentful. Now that's your fault. Like, I'm getting blunt here, but like now that's on you
Yeah.
because you're choosing that. You're choosing to say everybody's needs are way above mine and I'm just going to take a back seat. And I guarantee you that leads to anxiety, depression. It leads to all of those things. I mean, I'm not that kind of a doctor, but like it does lead to self-doubt and you know, um, and one thing you mentioned before, like honestly, there are times you were 100% right with like the husband being like, I'm just going to go golfing on one
Mm-hmm.
holiday every day. Because here's the thing, because they're not thinking as a team for childcare, because they get to do whatever. And that is a lot of husbands. Luckily, that's not mine, thank goodness, because I don't allow it, right? Like I
Same.
need space and I need space. So this is what we'll do. If it's been a rough week, I'm like, listen, I need like 2-ish hours of silence, uninterrupted to myself, whatever, out of this 48-hour weekend. What works best for you? I'll take any 2 to 3 hours. You tell
Yep.
me. I will, and I'll make it happen. And vice versa. Where do you need quiet time? Where do you need whatever time? And we literally look at the weekend. What do we have going on? Where can we fit it in? Because we both know now it did take about 5 years of having our kids, but we know now that that's not personal. It's not to upset anybody. It is literally just to breathe. And we want to give that to each other.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you take a look at the actual impact of you not practicing self-care, like think about the moments where you're like, ooh, I didn't really show up how I wanted to. Like I yelled a lot at my kids. I gave a lot of attitude towards my husband. I have been rejecting like most of his advances. I don't want to connect. I don't even like the idea of him wanting to hold my hand. Like anything, right? Like nagging, being super critical. If you take a look at all those moments, think about why was I so on edge, right? What could I have done differently beyond the approach, right? But what could I have done differently about my day to prevent that? Or at least grow your capacity to tolerate a lot of that stuff, because that stuff that happens, right? Our kids being kids, our husbands being our husbands, that's all very predictable behavior for the most part. So if we can predict and expect them to act in a certain way 95% of the time, then you have an idea of what you need to be able to handle to carry on with your day. That's where the self-care comes in. That's where taking care of yourself is going to give you that tolerance to not be like that, I don't know, come out as like the person that you unleashed because you just can't take any more.
Right.
And you're just so like, oh my God, I just can't believe I did that. And you just see the fear in your kids' eyes, right? Like, I yell, I'm
Mhm.
not going to like lie about it, but I can definitely tell when I have shitty sleep and the days where I really took care of myself, whether I gave myself extra time by waking up early or I've been really intentional about what I do for myself throughout the day.
Mhm.
Like, I'm two completely different people.
Yeah. I would I would even add on that too. Like I thought I'd be the mom that didn't yell at her kids. Like I was seriously like I was super calm before I had kids. Like it was kind of crazy. And then even like until I had my second kid, I really didn't like yell at the first one, like maybe once or twice, but it's just funny that you mentioned that because now that I have two and I'm pulled in a million, it seems like a million directions. Um, my patience level is so much thinner. But
Mm-hmm.
same thing. I'm like, okay, I got to check in because sometimes the volcano is going to erupt. That is natural.
Yep.
And then the same thing is, okay, but how can I repair that? Mommy gets mad. Mommy's not perfect. Mommy made a mistake. It's not whatever words you want to use to repair it. But like ultimately, my kids getting out the door on time for school is actually my fault for not
Yes.
planning ahead, for not. And so when I start rushing them out the door at the last minute, that's all on me. Right. And guess what? If they're late, it's going to be on me. And I'm the
Yes.
recovering perfectionist that doesn't want to get in trouble at school. I even asked the teacher, I'm like my daughter's in kindergarten and she's like, you guys are fine. Like, honestly, we tell people this time because we know they're probably going to be a few minutes late. I'm like, I'm a perfectionist. Like, you tell me.
Don't do that to me.
And so she's like, you guys really have never been late. I'm like, okay, all right, it's time to breathe then and stop but it's stuff that just you go through it and then you realize, okay, I kind of made a little bit of mistakes there. How do I move forward and move on? Because if we're not learning, we're staying stuck in those same negative patterns, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I happen to know that you have a book out that is about your relationship with your mom and how you have become the woman you are today, where you really prioritize yourself and living life for you instead of for your mom or to kind of just like fill in her shoes as her legacy, but rather creating your own legacy of what it means to live a life that's fulfilling under your own definition of what fulfilling means. So, what are your biggest lessons when it comes to loving yourself, taking care of yourself that you have learned from your mom, whether it's replicating or completely revamping?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love those two words. I've never used those, but you're right. There are things from her I totally replicate and then absolutely revamp the others to make it work for me. But I would say the number one biggest lesson I learned through our relationship was there's not just one way to do things
Mm,
because that is a revamp. Her way was the right way and the only way. And I also knew that as a kid. That's 100% not true. And doing stuff that feels good to me is always going to be the right way for me. And then my second thing I learned was the very first time I learned how to set boundaries, I did it with
mm,
her. Like the queen of stubborn, the queen of like my way is the right way. And I'm like, well, because you get to a certain point where the explosions just keep happening. And I would have
yes.
anxiety. And sometimes I would have panic on the phone because of just her overly critical demeanor. Where again, I'm not in blame anymore. Like I wrote a whole chapter about how I lived there and it robbed me of joy. But then I realized like this is just her. I can say that I don't like it, and I can also hang up the phone.
Hmm.
Right. And so what I told her was, hey, mom, when I kind of sense that this is going to happen, or if it's like starting to happen, I'm not mad at you anymore. But what I'm going to do is just hang up the phone. We'll try again another time. Now, I did use the word I didn't feel safe. And you better believe she was like, what are you talking about? You don't feel safe.
Uh-huh.
And
Triggered.
it was like literally the first time I was like, shoot, wrong word, lesson learned, hang up the phone. And then I could totally tell she was like, complaining to me, to my dad, like, how dare her? And I just stopped caring though,
Yeah.
because I knew deep down in my heart, the only way for me to have this relationship with her was to set that boundary.
Hmm.
And I will tell you, it did work over time. It wasn't perfect, but like, and a couple things I let slide if it wasn't too bad. And I didn't feel that like, guarded. I was just like, all right, she slipped, but we're still doing good with this conversation. But I got to judge that. And I was in
Hmm.
control and I could protect myself, so boundaries are huge and they're hard and it's okay. And you can learn how to do them softly. I call them like baby no's, where you're not saying no, you're saying no without saying no, right? So there's like ways to ease into it if you're really uncomfortable, because it's living a boundaryless life. You will never learn how to take care of yourself, right? You'll
No.
never speak your needs. You'll never, right? So learning how to set them, and even if it's scary and hard, just starting really small.
Yeah, definitely. Boundaries are important for every type of relationship. Even boundaries with yourself is incredibly important. And actually, setting boundaries is a form of self-care. So just take that in. Food for thought. Okay. So when did you accept that your mom is different and start choosing to kind of pave your own path? Because it's kind of hard, right? Like growing up, you're like, mommy knows best. And you follow in their footsteps because this is your primary caretaker. And they're showing you the ropes. They're teaching you what they know to be true, what they think works. And then at some point, we kind of like branch off and we can either stay on the same main branch or we can be like, go rogue, right? Like, it's going to be your own tree right next to you. So, what was that point for you?
Honestly, I think I was really young. I know that sounds like wild. I mean, my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, so like healthcare was in our blood, I kind of say. Like I loved every aspect of it, just watching them and the way they would talk about how special it was for them. So that I don't think that like they never like pushed me into it, but they were definitely excited that I went that route. Um, I think I just knew it as a young kid, because I knew I was different from my parents, which again, think about like being a kid, you kind of feel like the black sheep of the family, and
Totally.
you feel
It's
like,
hard.
and like I don't know how they're my parents. So there was a while where I was just like I wanted a different mom for a long time, because I'm like, she doesn't get me, she doesn't talk
Mm-hmm.
like me, like I like didn't understand that we came from the same branch, like honestly. And obviously, I'm mature now, I can kind of see our similarities and things, but that was actually hard, and I kind of knew that at a really young age, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I would say, going off to college was probably when I'm like, okay, and I struggled at first, because again, right, when you're really like leaving that nest and leaving it mentally, right? And then after college, I did some like really fun, adventurous things that I know my parents were like, what are you running away from? And I would tell them, I'm not, I'm running towards something.
Yes.
And they didn't like fight me on that. I think they knew. I think they knew who I was since I was a young child. And they were like, yep, we weren't surprised that she was just going to run off. Right. So I think it was like, I had like the seed planted as a kid. And then it just kind of came to fruition like after college, when I was like officially I couldn't wait to be on my own. Like, break free. I don't want anything. I didn't need anything from anyone. I didn't want anything from anyone, which also came to a fault later. But I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do life with no help. Like I can do this. And it built a lot of confidence. But again, right, there was some weaknesses later when, especially now, like being married, I'm like, oh, right, we're a team, we're a partnership. I'm not alone in
Yes.
the world. Right. So, yeah, that was kind of my journey.
I love that so much. I can probably talk to you forever about this because I am huge on this like personal self-development journey. It has genuinely changed my life for the better, starting off with like a yoga class, right? Like a breakup and then going like diving knee deep into yoga and taking me all through life coaching and whatnot. And so I just love your message. I'm sure the book that you have out there is amazing. So, can you tell people more about how to connect with you? Tell them about your book and how they can work with you.
Oh, yes. Wonderful. Yes. So on Instagram, it's Dr. Emily Jacobs. So Dr. Emily Jacobs. I would love to connect. I would love to, if you pop in, just say, hi, I was on the podcast, or listen to that. Let me know. And then the book is called Live Your Life for You, Not Your Mom. I'll like Pull it up. I always have to have it with me. But essentially, it's on Amazon, and then I think all the other major retailers now. So Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. It should be on their online stores. But essentially, really just talks about like what's holding you back from living a life you want, and where you do you have that expectation to do more and to be more, and then where can you get out of people pleasing perfectionist mindset and really start opening that up and believing in yourself, kind of despite what your mom or your friend or anybody, right, your boss, right? So it really, you could scratch out mom and fill it in with anybody else that you're just kind of like feel trapped in that and feel stuck in that. It's to help you get out of that and move forward.
Love it, love it, love it. And what about working with you? How can people work with you?
Yeah, so on my website, which is www.dremilyjacobs.com, right now I just offer one-on-one coaching. So I take people through 6 sessions, and it's been really fascinating to watch growth. I'm really into action steps. So if you were interested, I would sign up if you were ready to move forward, or at least think you are, right? I can help you assess that. But if you're ready to start taking tiny action steps, this is not like total body transformation, but it might happen at the end, right? But don't get scared, right? So it's really like we kind of talk about self-love and just like our thoughts and feelings around our past and how it's created us to where we are today, and then what we can take today to create a different story going forward.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so thank you so much for being on the show. But one more thing before we leave, I love to ask guests questions so that the listeners can get to know you better on a personal level. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. What's something you said you would never do once you become a mom, but that you're totally guilty of doing now?
Like literally just last week, and I've done it a few times. I looked at my daughter before she went to kindergarten with her hair disheveled because she tried to do her like own ponytail, and she's like, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to school." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you can't look like that." And I said it, and I was like, "Oh, I did it. I did it. You can't look like that." And then I was like, my husband even looked at me. He's like, "What was that?" I'm like, I don't know. It's like it came through me. And then I was just like, I mean, you backpedaling. I'm like, "You look great. Bye. Have a good time." I was like, way to go, confident.
Relatable.
Yeah, I was
relatable.
Like, oh God, it was horrible. Yes.
Yeah, totally. There's times where, so like we're into letting our kids dress themselves. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's like, I just have to like bite my tongue because I'm like, I want you to be you. I want you to be free to express who you are. This is not about me.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Next question is, what's something you're really looking forward to?
That's a great question. Like in motherhood, I mean, I'm really looking forward to just like watching my kids grow. And I know it's going to be really deep, but like, I really want to love them the way they need me to love them.
Yes.
And not the way that I think they do. And I'm going to struggle with this. I know this, and I'm not afraid to struggle with it. But that is one thing I don't think my mom was like. My mom was just like, "Oh, you're just like me." I'm like, I'm actually the opposite. But I already know my older daughter's very different from me. And I'm trying to just like understand, or maybe even not understand, but I'm trying to just like, I don't know, see how we both fit together. And we have talks every day. Like I told you, she's 5.5. And I'm like, we didn't do so good today. Like we fought a lot. And she's like, "Yeah, Mom, we did." And I was like, maybe tomorrow, like try again tomorrow. And she knows, like I tell her all the time, like, "Girl, I am not perfect. I'm still trying. I'm still learning." And so I guess that's what I look the most forward to is trying to really learn them and give them what they're telling me they need. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes total sense, because I think there was kind of like this formula that our parents' generation followed, right? Like, okay, well, you are clothed, you are fed, you are sheltered, you go to school, cool, right? Like it was more of like you were to be seen, not heard kind of culture. Mm-hmm. Whereas we're trying to flip it up on its head and say, okay, we're going to hear you, even though we were not shown how, even though it is difficult for us, but we want you to be honored as the person and individual you came here to be instead of who we think you should be. And that is a struggle, but also very, very liberating at the same time, because it's really healing to be able to offer our kids what we really needed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Listeners, if you have loved this interview, please go check her out. Go check out the show notes for all the details on how you can grab her book to read about her healing journey, on how she has gotten to where she is today, and help get insight on how you can do that for yourself and work with her. All right. Well, I will catch you back here next week. Thanks for listening in. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would so appreciate that. And if you love what I share here, then you're going to love and want to join my free private Facebook community that's also called Marriage and Motherhood. I hope to see and connect with you in there. Otherwise, I'll catch you back here next week for the next episode. Bye!